So here's a drawing that I found on the Sotheby's website by the great American painter Norman Rockwell. As you can see, it sold for $48,000, which is a nice recognition of Rockwell's importance. A lot of other lovely things by Rockwell on the site. This was for a series of calendars that he illustrated for about 17 consecutive years to study for summer. Obviously a boy fishing with his dog, a very long dog, you'll notice, on the embankment. This is actually the third try for me doing this copy, because the first time I didn't draw it very well, and the second time I drew it a lot better, but I stupidly didn't realize that after my computer recently updated itself, it changed my settings, so there was no audio the second time. Very frustrating. And so this will be the third time, and hopefully it'll go better. So we're going to start by blocking this in, and notice that the head is tilting forward a little because he's looking at the water. And notice that his body is very vertical. And his legs are angling down just a few degrees. And before we go much further, we're going to check some of these proportions. If we think about his head being about that size, so we're going to extend that out that way. And if we measure, and I'm going to measure the way I taught you to, like this, and the second head is going to end up going through the center of the hands, and the third head is going to go through the center of the cuffs on the jeans, and that would make the fourth head going down through near the bottom of the dog's ear. A little lower. So why is he only 4 heads tall? Obviously, it's because number one, he's sitting, and number two, he's a little boy, so his proportions are not going to be the same as adult proportions. So let's double check in our work. We've got one head, two heads, That's going to be where his hands are, roughly, and 3 heads for the cuffs, and then 4 heads. We're going to check a couple angles now. Let's look at this angle here from the knee to the front of the head, like that. That's going to give us a good sense if we have the legs coming out far enough. And this angle, which is just slightly kicked out that way, this angle and this angle. And this, remember, is called blocking things in. Incredibly useful way to approach the beginning of a drawing, because you are thinking of everything as a 2-dimensional shape. And we may as well throw in this angle here. And I feel like I need, if I draw this angle and relate the placement of it to here and to here, I can see that maybe it needs to be a little further to the right. And that's going to bring actually the face a little further to the right as well. You see how I'm making these decisions before I have done a single detail. And as I've said many times, you can certainly do this from life, even if you do not have the ability to draw these red lines all over everything. Still really a useful way to approach your drawing. So, let me just throw in a little block in a few more things here. So this shape is going to end up being very useful for sort of building things around, so we may as well throw that in. And see, I'm checking it with what it's underneath, what it's across from. And then we'll put in the sleeve. And that little seam down the front of his shirt. And this angle here for that clenched hand that's holding the fishing rod. So no dark lines, just an arrangement of, no curves either, just an arrangement of straight lines placing all the main elements of the drawing. And while I'm at it, I may as well just sort of block in that dog's head. The snout goes down a little past that last line. The ear comes right in front of the toes. So now we're going to get right into the hard part, which is the face. And this is what I have been really struggling with has actually given me a new appreciation for Norman Rockwell's drawing skills. I feel that probably would have been wise to block in the hat. See this angle? And from the back of the neck we come around and almost straight up to create the top part of the hat. And from the forehead we continue back with this line. If the hat looks a little big, I think it's supposed to. Makes him look smaller, which is the goal. Just check my focus here and lock that in. Okay. So, we're going to start, and here's the challenge, you guys. Look at the lightness of touch Rockwell uses here. We're going to try to match that. See that this S curve of the forehead coming around into the bridge of the nose. And unlike a typical nose shape, which is sort of like this, what we're seeing here is like this. You see that? It's like an arrowhead. Not what we see in adults. And the challenge is to draw it that way without making him look like a cartoon. So, having done that little S curve, I'm now going to pop my eye in right behind that indent. The reason it's not beneath the indent where we look for it is because the tilt of the head. And then I'm going to check, make sure my eye level is slightly below middle, which I think it is. You're wondering why it has to be below middle when I keep telling you to put the eyes in the middle. And that's because, again, small child, big cranium, relatively small face. So what I'm going to do is just sketch this in really light and loose. And before I refine it, I'm going to try to place the ear, because I think that's really critical. So here's the angle, the face. Notice that the ear is landing sort of on the top of the upper lip and not just above the eye. So the ear should be ending up right about here. And this collar is going to be important, so I'm going to block that in. Okay. So one thing I learned from failing at this a couple of times, or at least once, was to rely on my kneaded eraser to keep sort of cleaning the drawing up and pushing things back. So if you erase it about to here, you can still see your work, but it also gives you a chance to more freely go and improve it and replace things where they need to be. So here we go. I don't think those red lines are really necessary anymore, do you? So the real challenge here is, first of all, this kid has, by adult standards, a really massive forehead. You see what's going on there? And it really sticks out far. In fact, I think I have got it not quite far enough. So let's try just, but push that out a millimeter or so. And we can also see that the entire head is in shadow. And that's one of their challenges here, is that we do not have the typical shadow mapping to help us with this form. The whole thing is in shadows. It's very flat. So I'm going to go ahead and put that tone in. And here's that little tuft of hair on top. And here's the bottom of the brim of the hat going back, just sort of intersecting with that ear, coming out the other side. And you'll notice I'm focusing on, I'm trying to get some of my darks in, because once we place the darks, we can see at a glance sort of where we stand a lot more easily, and where we can find our way around the drawing a lot more easily. So I'm going to go ahead with some ear detail. So that's the part I think will be the easiest. Tragus, antitragus, helix, antihelix. And you'll notice that that little smudge of dark that I put for the iris is reading too close to the ear and too far from the nose. So I think all I have to do to pull that together is just to place that ear, that eye, just a hair further forward, like that. And that makes a little more sense. And notice he's got this darkening around the boy's eye socket, which is a little odd. It looks like he was a little tired when he was posing for Mr. Rockwell. And here's the kid's nostril, just a little touch there. And a very sort of thrusting forward and long philtrum. A lot of color in the lips. And this lip is set back really far from the upper one. And I'm going to have to revise a little bit because I'm running out of room for the chin, but I can just put that a quarter or of an inch or so further down than I had it before. And here's that slight darkening along the jawline. So I'm not too unhappy with this. Notice that my outlines are much heavier than Mr. Rockwell's, so what I'm going to do is use the kneaded eraser and just sort of kick everything back a notch. And that sort of has something approaching the feeling of this drawing. I'm going to go ahead now and go a step darker for the shadow under the hat. I think Rockwell was right-handed, but shading direction is not a big deal in this drawing. He's really into using tones for texture, and the too strong of a hatching would get in the way of that, I think. So, but notice that as soon as I darken the shadow under the hat and put a little darkening along here for the hair, what happens is the skin, which I looked a little dirty when I first shaded it, is going to start to look lighter and cleaner. And I didn't shade that bottom lip yet. Like I was saying, it's got a lot of color on the lips, and that is because small children often do have much redder lips and cheeks than older people do. You can really appreciate when you look at that Rockwell, and especially when you try to draw it, just how much subtlety there is in the gaze. I mean, it really looks like he's just staring intently at some spot in the water, and I'm having a much harder time achieving that. I realize we're not even really seeing his iris. It's really just his eyelash and a little bit of the white of the eye, but somehow together they give that sense of looking intently. And if you watch me struggle with this, you can see that when I do it, it looks like he's just falling asleep. or board. Okay, but you do not want to watch me do this all day long. And I don't want to do it all day long. This is, like I said, did I say this? My third time, yes, doing this drawing today. So, remember not to try to copy my hatching direction unless you're left-handed. Notice the hat just got a little bigger. Look at the beautiful texture of the cloth on that hat. I frankly don't even know how he does that. It just, like all great art, it just looks effortless. Like he wasn't even trying. Which is, of course, what effortless means. Okay, so now that I've blocked in the head, it's going to be much more easily. My other errors are going to just like really be much easier to see. So here's that seam across the front of his shirt. Here's that other sleeve. All of this is in shadow, so we're just going to throw some shadow on there, and look what happens to the face when we do that. It suddenly goes from looking like it's too light to too dark to looking like it's too light. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and just shade that down another step. And artists always seize opportunities like this one. You see what we're looking at here? This is a cast out of the hat. It's falling across the shoulder, and it's defining the roundness of that shoulder. You see that? And what else defines it? How about this crease right here? And that's what an artist can do that a camera doesn't do, is selectively emphasize those sorts of features that really bring out the form and minimize or eliminate altogether the features that do not. So I think it's time to back out a little and see how things are looking more in context, because it's feeling to me like his body might be a little too short. Yet upon review, I can see that that might not be the case, because it may just be that living as I do in my world, surrounded by fully grown people, I'm not used to seeing such small rib cages. And unless you work at a daycare or have a big family, that's probably also the case for you. Kids have huge skulls in comparison to their rib cages. So I'm going to bring the back of this arm a little further back. That whole arm, actually. And I'm trying to conceptualize where's the shoulder in relation to the face. You see that? And I think what I can see I need to move is here's this sleeve. And I am running out of room for this hand, so I'm going to see that hand is still just a little rectangle. So look how easy it is to move it down. And as I'm trying to place these, I'm constantly, my eyes going back to the face. I'm trying to relate everything back to the head, which is easy to do because the head is pretty resolved. It's not perfect, but it's probably as good as it's going to get. So I'm still feeling I don't have quite enough room here to here though. So it may be that this, remember I keep pulling this arm to the left. This sleeve is not as thick as I thought it was. It's got a lot of these creases in here and these little wrinkles. 1, 2, 3. That gives us the space we need through there. Notice you can only see 2 fingers on this hand, which is going to bother some of you because you think, oh, it's not going to look like a hand unless it's got all 5 fingers. But that's all you need, just the 2 that show and a little bit of shading along here to give it a little roundness. And then on this side, look at how straight this is across the knuckles. And then we can see 1, 2, 3, 4 fingers. Like that, and a thumb. Okay, back to shading. This whole front of the shirt, just like the face, is pretty much all in some kind of shadow. And over here, I really want you to appreciate just how beautifully drawn this sleeve is. And I'm going to zoom in on it if I can to show you that. And mine looks pretty bad in comparison. In case you're not sure that real artists do all this shadow mapping that I keep talking about, I think you can see very clearly what's going on here, right? It's like you can even see that he has outlined the shapes of the shadows very deliberately. And as I keep telling you, it's like drawing the shapes of countries. And you don't worry about what it is, you just worry about copying the shape about right. And once you've done that, then you go back, use your first shading direction, whatever it is, and very lightly fill it in. If you want, you can try to match Rockwell's shading direction. It's always really a better idea just to try to be true to the motif. You will learn more that way. And again, I want to emphasize just how beautifully simple this drawing is. There's really not. See how quickly I was able to copy that sleeve? I mean, there's not much more to it than that. It's just so well understood that it doesn't need to be precisely copied. You've heard me in the past sort of put down the kinds of photorealistic drawings that, you know, just do a great job of duplicating every single detail in a photograph, and that's not what we're about here, because that's what printers are for. So this seems to be like a beat up old tin can. And I don't know if he intentionally smudged it or if it's just that he placed it maybe with charcoal first and then moved it. But there's definitely a little smudging going on here. It wouldn't hurt the drawing to try to duplicate some of that. And you can also see these kind of searching lines as he's trying to figure out, you know, how big to make that. Notice that this is the back of the boy's pants here, and then this is the back of the dog here. And we're going to go ahead and throw in some of those darks to set off and bring out our lights. Okay, and I think I'm going to zoom out again a little bit. And notice that he has peculiarly, seems to be wearing almost like a tracksuit. Almost like a Slavic hard bass musician, which I'm sure he was not. So we need to leave a little extra room across here to accommodate these stripes. And look at, just again, look at the simplicity and beauty of this. He's got this crease here, some other sort of opposing folds through here. And then he's got these stripes, and you can see, first of all, that the fabric from which the stripes are made is sort of thicker and stiffer than the fabric of the pants, because these creases here, they cut sort of right underneath the stripes in a very believable way. And I'm sort of botching this, but he has done an amazing job. And over on this side, you've got this leg sticking out here. And this is sort of all in shadow. And then it has these darker accents coming up through it. And notice I'm not trying to copy all these exactly. I'm just sort of going for the feel here. Okay. So when I see a proportion that surprises me, I like to try to visualize the geometric shape. So what surprises me here is just how wide the bottom of this pants leg is. So I would normally just do this in my mind, but I'm drawing it for you so you can more easily see what's going on. So there's this angle, this angle, this angle. And look at how this overall shape is like a almost as wide as it is tall. And that's the surprising thing, because we think of a pants leg as being much longer than it is wide, but this boy has rolled up his pants. He's probably been down splashing around in the water, and the pants also seem to be a little too big for him, which again makes him look smaller. And having this shape here, which I can draw again over here just to show you what I'm thinking of. See what I mean? Very easy to miss these proportions unless you think about it that way. Okay, working our way down. Notice that his ankle is way at the back of the cuff here. It's not centered. And the foot I'm also thinking of as a simple geometric shape. Before I do toes, I'm going to make sure I've got a sense of the overall shape, which is going to be like this. Pause that if you have to. And then I'm going to sort of shape the toes here. And notice, very important, that each toe has got this little lovely little movement to it. You see that? And that's what makes them look like toes. And I'm kind of running out of room for that last one, so I'm going to have to kick that out a little. And this is a normal kind of protrusion on that side, the toe bone. Toe bone is not an anatomical term, I'm sorry. I'm pretty rusty on all that stuff. And here's that other foot, which is much easier. It's just a few lines and curves on the other side. And a little bit of shading to set it off behind the foot that's in front. And here's the really weird thing, which is that this pant leg over here, look how it sticks way out past the other one. And now we've got our dog, and I'm afraid as everything kind of shifted to the right, I'm going to have to shift that dog over a little too. Remember that dog's ear has to end up on this side of this toe. So that means the dog's head is going to be way over here. And the snout. That was probably a mistake trying to block in the dog before I even had drawn the feet. Okay, keep moving that dog's head. This kind of drawing from the world of illustration is really about creating a believable performance. It's like acting, except instead of manipulating the muscles in your face and your body, you're manipulating lines on paper, but your goal is the same. You're trying to achieve a certain legible feeling, likeness, expression. And that's all just really hard to do. And it's what Rockwell was really a master of. If you look back over his work, and I hope you'll think about doing that, every expression on every face is just so convincing. And often moving. Okay, my dog is not looking very beautiful. I need to get a little sense of that light in the eye. A little more darkening around his nose. See that little bit of texture along his snout. You can see that other ear hanging down the other side. That's a little better. Although notice my dog looks relatively lifeless compared to Norman's. Throw in a little bit of this shading under the leg. And now we're going to zoom out and have a look at the overall stuff here. A little cash out underneath these toes, a little more darkening of that foot. I can extend, if I shift my paper, you can see where the rest of the tail is going to go. And then the only prop that really matters in this drawing is, of course, the one we didn't do yet, which is the fishing pole. So let's block that in. You can use a ruler for something like this if it helps. At a certain point, you won't need to. I know I used to have to use rulers for that kind of thing. And I guess that's going to be my version of this lovely drawing by Norman Rockwell. But before we go, as promised, we're going to see if practice made perfect, or if being late in the day I just got more tired and lazy. So bring out that forehead a little bit more with that. See those tufts of hair and how they set off the roundness of the forehead. So let me just move my camera up so I can show you the whole drawing. Get them to be about the same size and get my face out of the way there. You can see that my shading is still not resolved. This needs to be more of a solid dark, and these are things that you only expect to see from a little bit of a distance. And I didn't go dark enough still on the boy's forehead. Look at how subtle this is, but you see right under his eyebrow, you see that little bit of lightening? And this dark right here is not really a shadow. Circles under his eyes. It's because of the uplighting. All our light is coming probably reflected from the surface of the water. So Rockwell has very beautifully, suggested that water reflections bouncing up that light source that's underneath him. And I have a long way to go to get that to look convincing, but that's where I was sort of hesitating to make that circle under his eye, because I associated it with fatigue, but actually it was very normal for somebody with the light coming from that direction. So yeah, that still looks kind of splotchy up here, doesn't it? I didn't really complete the rest of his hairline. But that's going to have to do it. So that's this version. And here was the one, that was my second version. And I think the face is a little better proportion this time, although neither one of them are quite right. And here was the first one. And that one, I'll zoom in on it. That one I was just like, no, I cannot continue this drawing. This is really just too embarrassing. So 3 tries. And I don't know. And I don't know if I improved or got worse, but at least you can hear me this time. So thanks a lot, and see you next time.